You as even a manager, a new person just stepping into the organization, that area, and there's some accommodations that are in place. Don't necessarily automatically cancel it. Say, oh, stop, I don't want this, bring the person back to work or whatever, cancel this accommodation. Find out what's going on first. Find out why it was accommodation, was it proper channels, those type of things. And if you find the proper process wasn't taken, just take it through the process. It may still be valid, unfortunately, or not unfortunately. Maybe the people didn't just do what they should have done to document why they came to their decision. But just to go and cancel because you think it's not the wrong thing or right thing to do, be that as it may, it's in place, especially if it's working. The person's a good performer, they're getting things done, there's no call from their clients and people you service that's the issue, then maybe you just need to go back and revalidate the process, and that's all you need to do. So at least under your watch, it's clear on why the decision was made. But that was one of the things about this case too, where some things were in place, if I remember right, some things were in place, and the person just arbitrarily said, oh, we're done, and that's it, because I'm the new person in town. Don't work that way sometimes. Take it through the process. So, like I said, you make sure you work with HR folks and ER staff and employee relations and everybody that you need to talk to. I put this slide up here, and the best way to avoid a complaint, there's your answer. There is none. Let's go back to like one of the bullets that we talked about. Any decision can be challenged. Now, when you talk about a complaint, you can't sit around worrying about what's going to happen when your decision is being made. There is none. A person can question or raise a complaint about anything, and that's their right. That's the process that need to be there. But you as a manager, again, just as much as we're going to identify this species as endangered species, was going to stop a whole construction project, whether it's a road being built, buildings being built, or whatever, you're going to be prepared to answer the question, why is this species endangered? What are you basing this on, etc. When you do some change in your management, again, you got a 50-year management plan or whatever it might be, you can refer to that. What is no difference here? You can't make a decision about whatever change you change your organization. You're going to move the staff into this other area or whatever. Or you're going to eliminate the staff because of reductions in funds. You're going to do that. Be prepared like anything else. Have the legitimate, non-business reason to doing what you're doing. It really is as simple as that. And I'm going to keep harping that in because that's really what the essence we're talking about here. And here are my 3 C's that I think that kind of hopefully help sums up what I've talked about here today. First one, communication. I've said this before. You're talking to your supervisors. You're talking to, even in some situations where you might have to call the regional office to give you a heads up. This is what's going to happen. You're probably going to hear some things. Talking to your HR folks. When you're going through a process, removal or whatever, your reasonable accommodation person, you should be working with them. Whoever resources, the good example about hanging the poster in that building. I don't know whether it's barracks or whatever. What's the policy? What's the housing policy that's tied in with that? You know, what is going to help you communicate and understand what's going on? Communication is key because, again, I'm a person who's, in my previous jobs, names submitted to Chief of the Forest Service and the White House on my job, what I was doing, but everybody knew what was going on. They were in the loop about the work I was doing. So there was no panic that all of a sudden my name, some letter going to Al Gore. But they knew what was going on. So again, how you communicate, letting folks know what's going on. And also to your employees too. That's what's important. Talk to your employees. Sometimes, whether you find it through mediation, or, I don't know how many times I had to call a park or a forest when I worked at the other agency, but the park saying, because somebody talked to this person. They don't know what's going on. Nobody's talked to them. Maybe that person who works in the unit, they've worked there for the last 10 years, they were not selected for a position that they knew, so they swore up and down. They're the best person for it. I've been there 10 years. I deserve this. They're not selected. And nobody's come to talk to them, tell them why they were selected. Where were they lacking at? Why were they, if it's going to show, why did they select the candidate they did? And sometimes, yeah, there's a chance that person still may file a complaint. They may file a grievance or whatever. But at least you've done your job and talked to them, shared with them, here's why this decision happened. Here's where you're weak at. Here's what you need to do to strengthen yourself to be consideration or be among the best qualified. And here's how I'm going to help you get there. Will you be competitive in the future? Those type of things. And sometimes employers, when I talk to them, I say, hey, I'm going to find an answer out for you. I'm going to get an answer for you. You may not like it, but I'll get an answer for you. And some people, that's all they want to hear. So talk to your people. Let them know what's going on. Even you think it's not important, but may not be important to you, may be important to your employees. Consistency. Look at some of the cases that were in here, some of the scenarios. One was not much communication, but one thing was consistent, your decisions. When you make a decision, when you go through a process, or you're doing it consistently, if you take an adverse action, or you're doing a dozen factors every single time, not that the decision is going to come out the same as far as whether you suspend somebody, whether you don't suspend somebody, or how long it's going to be there on the beach, or the severity of it, but you've gone through the process each and every time. You didn't skip it. You didn't take a step and skip it. You're consistent that here these folks are going to go training. My philosophy is all new people get, if I got limited training dollars, all new employees who need it is going to go to training first. People may not agree with that, but if they can show you a track record, this is how it's going to be. And then we make sure everybody goes who need the training, but we always got to take care of limited funds. We take care of people who need the most training, or the training that's tied into directly to their position. We're going to do that. We talk about some of the scenarios. We consistently, for the last 5 years, we've been one of the top parks in visitor use. So Saturdays and Sundays are our busiest days. So there are no days off on Saturday and Sunday. That is a regular work day outside of requesting vacation. That's how we are. So this is not an issue of somebody who has religious beliefs, is Seventh-day Adventist or whatever. And along with that, when you are challenged with it, we can show the documentation to back up why we schedule the way we schedule. It's not against somebody's belief or whatever, and we consistently apply that too. But then remember, when you do make that decision that, you know what, this is a great person, I want to pick this person up, I want to let them go to church on Sundays, then you just open the door and be prepared how you're going to deal with your other folks. And be consistent with them. How are you going to allow them to go to church if they want somebody to come and say they want to do the same thing? So be prepared to deal with that. But key thing is being consistent in what you're doing. And cooperation. Cooperation, I think that probably ties in again. It maybe loops with some of the other two areas, but again, when you talk about working with me as an equal opportunity officer, working with your HR officer, working with a solicitor, when you got to deal with some issues. Defensive posture. Why do I want to cooperate when I didn't do anything wrong? Well, that's when you're still supposed to cooperate, I would think, when you didn't do anything wrong. So, cooperate with the folks that are working with them. And one thing I didn't talk about through this process, we talk about settlement agreements. Sometimes, and let's get back to that stat I gave about $319 million in monetary benefits. Sometimes, cooperation means that sometimes we may have to settle some things that, maybe we don't like to do, but maybe it's good business. Maybe it's like business, not personal. Maybe sometimes we need to resolve things for what's best for the agency and best for all the parties involved. And I give you a good example. I was dealing with a unit, wound up having basically getting ready to move somebody in the probationary period. The person filed a complaint, and the unit was dead right in what they were doing. Totally right what they were doing. But to resolve the complaint, all the person wanted was $1,300 to cover some costs for moving or whatever. Talked about it, and like I talked to that manager, I said, $1,300, when you think about the cost of an investigation alone is a minimum $2,400, $2,500. It can go even higher. Do an investigation, the time that's involved, and then you start going to a formal complaint, and then $1,300 is going to, basically deal with this complaint and it just moves on. It would be good business to settle it. Not that you're wrong, and when you settle agreement, you're not saying that you're wrong. You just agree, the party just agree that we disagree. We'll say it like that, but you're not saying that, admitting that you've done anything wrong. We just settle it and move on. And sometimes we got to say, there are a period of time, that's when you work with your solicitor and staff, when you have to move forward and maybe take it all the way through. But sometimes, hey, what's the bigger picture? The person's gone, they moved on. You actually come out with less money spent than what you would have done going through the whole process. And sometimes the manager, sometimes you might have to, I'm just straight. Sometimes you might have to bite your lip, grit your teeth, and move forward. Business, not personal. What's the benefit for the agency? So you need to think about that when you talk about cooperation. And again, I kind of digressed a little bit, but that's really important as a manager. That's your job sometimes, make that assessment. And sometimes you got to make that call. And in the end, remember these 3 C's. If you're consistent, you work with your EEO, trusted advisors, folks you got faith in, And I know if you do have faith in all your HR folks, and you make good effort, sincere effort. It's doing the right thing. It's not a thing of you got to do it. Well, it's our job. We should be treating our employees fairly. We should be reasonable when we're making our decisions, when we're looking at issues. We should be doing that. So this is not something asking you extra to do. Because it's usually when you're doing it, operating like that, you're going to come out okay. But when you sometimes take harsh positions, or, I'll be honest with you, sometimes not willing to admit that we're wrong. Okay. There are times when we are wrong. You need to keep that in mind. And remember, I keep saying it again, bid is not personal. And always trying to do the right thing, which is what we should do as individuals anyway.